So you've gotten past the introduction. We still haven't written any jokes yet. You think this is a total waste of money. It's not. We just need to lay a foundation so that you know exactly how to get there. So in this, how is the show structured? It's really important for you to understand what you're working towards. There's a lot of different shows that exist out there, and so there's a lot of different shows that exist out there, but I just want to show you kind of the more standard structure of a stand-up show that you might find at the Improv, or at Uncle Funny's, or at the Funny Bone, or at Mitzi Shore's, the Comedy Store, or at Gotham. These are all really standard places that typically in an evening will have 3 comedians. And we'll talk about how that expands from there. But typically, in a stand-up comedy show, you're going to have an MC. And the MC is the person that warms up the crowd. They're going to typically do 5 to 7 minutes, and they're going to warm up the audience. And you'll find that if you ever go to a stand-up comedy show, that your opinion of the MC is that they're the worst comic. And that's not always the case, because you may very well find that MC the evening before being a feature or a headliner and really getting a lot of laughs. The MC's job is to get everybody settled down so that they can get their drinks ordered and their food and do a really good job of handling the audience and the crowd. They typically don't get paid much, if anything. Most clubs will maybe pay them $50, if that, but at least they'll get a drink or two out of it if you go to a respectable comedy club. After the MC, you're going to have what's called the feature. And that feature is going to do anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes of material. And the feature is not necessarily who everybody came to see, but it's someone that's up and coming, someone that's been working their tail off for probably 5 to 7 years, that's making a living at comedy. Not a great living, but can typically make somewhere between $300 to $1,000 a week, traveling around at least their region or state, doing stand-up comedy. But they can do 15 to 25 minutes, and they're pretty good most of the time. But in order to become a feature, you've got to be an MC first. And then to move from being a feature to what's called the headliner, which a lot of people are familiar with that term, headliner. A headliner can do anywhere from usually 35 minutes to 60 minutes. And so you'll find in a lot of shows that if the headliner is a really big name, you'll find that that headliner won't even have an MC or may not even have a feature. They might remove one of those two, and they might very well bring one of those 2 people with them as part of their package. So someone that's a friend of theirs or someone that they want to reward to travel around the country with, kind of buddy up with. And headliners will do that a lot to make sure that they understand what kind of show that they're getting. If you go to start watching a lot of live comedy shows, and I totally recommend that you go online and Google stand-up comedy in my area and go watch a bunch of shows, whether you know the comedians or not, you can find that the first couple of comedians can very well ruin an audience for a headliner. And the headliner doesn't really have much of a chance to make it because the audience is already sour from maybe a comedian being too dirty or just not funny or being offensive or doing material that doesn't necessarily line up or mesh with the kind of stuff that the headliner is doing. So the headliners a lot of times will control how the show goes so that they know that by the time they get up on stage and close out the show, they're in great shape. Stand-up comedy show typically goes for 90 minutes, and like I said, your MC is 5 to 6 minutes. Sometimes there'll be a guest spot, and that's like a 10-minute spot that the booker or the person that is booking the club will put in there to kind of test how they do in front of an audience to possibly give them a feature position or an MC position. Hardly ever a headline position, just because headliners have a reputation of their own and agencies and whatnot. Then after the guest spot, you have the feature and then the headliner. Now, like I said, there's a lot of different ways a show can be structured. So, for example, in our shows at Sick Puppies Comedy, we'll have a stand-up comedian, and that stand-up comedian will come in and do like 5 minutes, and then we'll improvise based off of what they did. We might bring in another comedian for 5 minutes, and improvise off of that. You might do a one-man show. You might create your own room. You might create your own show. You might run your own theater. The potential for what you can do with this craft is really unlimited. But I just want to teach you the fundamentals of what you can typically find at a stand-up comedy club so you can understand what you're working towards. So the goal is for you to work towards 5 minutes so that if you get good enough with your 5 minutes, you can start to ask about hosting and being an MC. Then you're going to want to work on 15 to 25 minutes to be a feature. And then you're going to want to work on 35 minutes to 60 minutes to become a headliner. This takes a lot of time, and you should be prepared to be writing every single day and getting up on stage as often as possible, sometimes 3 to 5 times a week. I hope this all makes sense. Your job between now and your next module is to go into Netflix and watch 3 different Netflix specials. I don't care who they are or what they are, but I want you to watch them and pay attention to them. And if you can, before you take the next module, I would love for you to go visit a stand-up comedy show. Not an open mic night. Those are very different, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But I'd really love for you to head out, go take a look in your area, and look up live stand-up comedy shows at a prominent stand-up comedy place. And if you're not sure what those are, one of the best recognized names in the country is The Improv, which is confusing. It's The Improv, but they do stand-up comedy. Or Gotham in New York City, or the Comedy Store. So take a look at those formats, see if you have anything like that in your area. Do your best, and we'll see you for the next module. Thanks.